Welcome to the Trumpet of the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
And the wind just picked up here.
Did it? I can't hear it.
What it picked up, we're not sure, but it picked up.
Felt like it tried to pick up the trailer.
Well, see, you guys are a little bit south of where it has a tendency of picking up buildings and dropping them on old ladies on bicycles.
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
But you're not
that's
that
true.
far south of it.
Why was a witch riding a bicycle anyway?
Because it was
Her broom
something
had a
they could
flat.
easily analog and turn into a broom using practical effects.
They were making a comment about her personality, is what they were doing.
With the bicycle part, or
No, yeah. The whole thing, they were inferring that she had a personality of a witch.
well, yeah. But Robert asked the question why a witch would be riding a bike. And the practical answer comes down to the fact that it can be easily juxtaposed with a broom when using practical effects.
No, obviously she was just a modern witch embracing the times.
Yes, just like
Brooms
how
just weren't
all
hip
modern,
anymore.
all the in the know modern witches use either Swiffers or Roombas these days.
It saves time and effort that way.
So, what do you think of the French presidential election?
I know nothing about it.
Yeah, well, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't kept close track of it, but I have kept track of it a little bit. Macron's in trouble. Seeing as a good portion of the vote seems like it's going to go to quote unquote right wing candidates, whatever that means. And the way that the presidential election works, it goes in two phases for France. They have the first round of elections, and whoever gets the most votes in the first round, the two candidates will compete against each other in a second round of votes, making theirs technically a pass the poll election just like ours. In fact, I think they may be the only country in Europe that does that. For the longest of time, it's looked like it was going to be a matchup between Macron, the current incumbent, and Marine Le Pen, who is most known for her very strong stance on Frexit.
Which
And
would be a
before
good thing.
Josh complains about another
I still think it's
exit,
Stupid naming scheme.
I didn't come up with it, okay? Okay, Brexit was the first one, then Texit, then Frexit, okay?
If you're gonna be uncreative, then just call
But
it the
And
Exodus.
and Italix and Polix.
Polexit and Italexit
Oh,
are also existing terms, though they're not nearly as catchy as Texit,
On an unrelated note,
regardless of what Josh says.
do are house cats in Poland technically polecats?
yes. They're all polecat.
Anyways,
That's why that's why they have to fumigate their house so often.
so yeah, Marine Le Pen's number one running point was Frexit. Because believe it or not, even though France is the second most influential power in the EU, it's exactly that, the second most, not the most influential. And that kind of gets rid of the incentive for the French to even be in the EU, especially since it's destroying their culture.
And especially being
So a lot of French people,
the whole idea of the French establishing and making the EU in the first place was so that they could become a world power again.
Interesting how that turned out.
yeah, funny how they just ended up being Germany's lackey. But the EU isn't, it's not very popular with the French people. But who you know who else isn't popular? Marine Le Pen.
Wow.
She doesn't have much to run
How much
on
you want to
beside
bet?
that,
Because
beside
she's
Frexit.
running on a standpoint that sounds like Freckles.
But
Hell,
she doesn't have much of popularity that she's running on, and she's just not a very likable person, and that hurts her. Even though Macron's not very well liked either.
when you're a one stunt pony,
So yeah, well, I mean, yeah, well, that was basically how Boris Johnson got in. We'll talk about him later, but but when they were doing the presidential polling, a particular name kept coming up for a guy who wasn't even running for president. And his name was Eric Seymour, spelled with a Z. And he
Spelled with a
is
Z, you
a,
said?
well, was an,
Where on earth would you put
yeah,
Zemor.
spelled with a Z.
Where on earth would you put a Z in Eric?
It's right after the C with a just a little space.
Kind of like the movie from the 70s that the main character is Sabata instead of the Zapata from Mexico.
But so Eric Seymour, he actually has a platform. Like it or not, he has a platform. He has seen what the EU's done
It's
to
mostly under his
France.
feet.
So he wants to he's seen what it's done to France all around him. And he's
Today we see how
running
many
on
jokes Robert
a
can try to dodge
very
before he stumbles.
he,
I think I found it.
he's been running on a very pro-nationalistic stance, which of course makes him hated by the entirety of French media. Because since the French helped start the EU, or you could argue started the EU and the others helped, they've seen a tremendous erosion of their culture due to the immigration policies of the EU. Because the EU pretty much has open borders with the Middle East. And so what's happened is they've had the gigantic influx of immigrants, which, you know how in the US there have been concerns about us losing our culture because of our open southern border, and the Democrats are like, "Oh no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to lose our culture. You're being paranoid." But if you look at Europe, that's exactly what's happened. It's happened to London, it's happened to Berlin, it's happened to Paris. Most of the major cities across Europe have lost their European culture. They say every 2 weeks, I think it was 3 churches go down and a mosque goes up. the quality of life across France has plummeted. The general poverty level skyrocketed. The number of
Which
terrorist
is
attacks has
saying
skyrocketed.
something considering they didn't have the best quality of life to begin with.
That's true, but how and
I didn't catch a
socialism.
word of what you just said. You went all robotic there.
I said that's true. How much of that though is due to personal decisions on their part and socialism?
Oh, it's
Like
almost entirely
most of it.
social. But then again, you
But
are talking a group of people that when the Nazis invaded in World War II, they threw up their hands and surrendered. Please don't bomb us.
They also are
but
the same group of people that let's see, they surrendered to Napoleon, and then they surrendered to the people that overthrew Napoleon, and then when Napoleon came back, they surrendered to him all over again, and then they surrendered one last time when Napoleon got overthrown the last time.
You know, the French are some of the best people at giving up in the Europe.
but Macron represents that status quo, the EU status quo, and that's obviously not very popular, especially among the French who want to be French. So Seymour is running on a platform of French nationalism. Return France to being. Now that obviously from an American, because let's be honest, while France snubs its nose at us, we snub our nose back at them.
Which wasn't always the way things were.
Okay, so the
Alright, so to boil it down, uh, there are three major politicians fighting for president in France right now. Politician A, who nobody likes but has one single point that people do support. Politician B, who nobody likes and has something and stands on a platform that no one supports. And politician C, who may or may not be an actual politician, who is actually standing on a platform of nationalism and return France to France and bring back the franc and do away with the euro.
Pretty much yes, except that there are always the establishment people who will vote for politician B.
Yeah.
they he also has a stand of throwing out the Islamic immigrants.
But pretty much, well, what he wants is he wants assimilation. He wants them to become French.
And if they won't assimilate, they're to leave.
But
Now,
there's
speaking of playing cultural hardball, and this is a bit of news for the U.S. military, actually. So, in recent times about the coronavirus and all these mandates coming down, the U.S. military mandated vaccines across the board for all members of the military, with the option of a pending waiver for either health or religious reasons. Where if you didn't get the vaccine and you didn't have one of those pending waivers, you were to be kicked out. Now, here's where that story develops. They decided to play hardball with people and say, okay, you guys don't want to play by the new rules? Fine. We're rejecting all religious waivers, kicking everyone out. Now,
They're being sued for that.
they are being sued for that, but here's an initial thing. They found out that they're kicking out too many people. They can't maintain the military the way it is. But at the same time, due to their rules and their regulations, they've already gone too far in the process of kicking everyone out. So they had to walk back their religious waiver mandate that kicks out everyone regardless of whether you apply for a religious waiver or not. But at the same time, they still have to kick out all the people that they just rejected the religious waivers for, and they just have to up recruiting. So they've crippled themselves and gotten nothing out of it.
The recruitment's
Oh,
down anyway.
I know.
oh yes, they have got something out of it. They're going to be taking and paying these people they're kicking out a fortune for
Due to
violating their
religious
constitution
discrimination.
due to
Yeah.
religious discrimination. And the Biden administration has lost every court case.
Hmm.
Even
in the leftist courts, they've lost.
And it's looking like we're about to start a war, so, I mean, it's a win-win-win, isn't it? Because right now, because the US decided to cut off all of Russia's economic avenues in order for Russia to sustain itself, it's looking like it's going to have to invade Ukraine.
Russia's also taking and helping Belarus blackmail the EU.
Which Poland's not having any of it, which is fantastic. Go Poland.
And Lithuania.
Yeah. But
Poland, the modern day Romania,
what do you mean Romania is still
blocking the invasion of the Muslims.
I think it's Poland and Hungary right now have the reputation as the black sheep of the EU. Which is funny because Hungary got in the way of Romania back in the day. Or Wallachia, as it was at that time.
Wallachia did. Who do you think the modern Dracula is?
To be fair, Wallachia was just a region. It wasn't the entirety of the country.
No, it was a principality. It actually was self-governing.
I'm
But
still pretty certain that even as a principality, it wasn't. You can be a self-governing principality and not be independent, technically.
It was de facto a client state of Hungary's, but I mean, as long as Dracula was on the throne, there was no real telling him what to do.
That's true enough.
And think about it, he had a way with the Muslims.
Yeah, he knew exactly how to stick it to them.
I still can't get over that he staked as many people of the Ottomans after one battle as he had in his entire army. Enough where the Ottomans decided to just go home.
Well, think about it. When they send emissaries to him to find out why he's not paying and he drives nails in their heads. Is it any wonder that the Catholic Church canonized him and declared him a saint?
Well, he single-handedly won a war against the greatest superpower in the region at the time.
He ended up losing shortly thereafter because they poisoned him, but and there wasn't another Dracula to take his place. Not really.
Yeah. And his brother was a traitor.
His brother, I think, was dead at that point.
No,
both of them.
From what I've gathered, his brother was the gay lover of the Ottoman prince.
Be that as it may, his brother is the one who ousted him and then died on the throne, and Dracula got it back.
Yeah.
But anyways, So yeah, it's looking like we've got a crippled military, and our politicians are trying to pick a fight with Russia. They really are just utter incompetence.
Well, too bad for them. I told them that I would. You got something on your camera there. I
Yeah,
told them
fly.
that I would rejoin the military if it came down to an all-out war with China. Russia was not part of the bargain.
Well, it's kind of interesting. The U.S., according to polls, the vast majority of Americans believe that China is our largest threat. The Democrat politicians all say that Russia is our biggest threat. The Republican politicians say that China is our biggest threat. And just think, it was the Democrats that accused Trump of trying to take and relive the Cold War.
Well, we've gone over projection ad nauseum.
Yes, they. It's confession through projection is just a way of life anymore. It seems like in when dealing with politicians.
But if we end up going to war with Russia, it's almost guaranteed they're going to reinstitute the draft, which is going to destroy their popularity even more. And it kind of makes me wonder. So they've got the vaccine requirement. In boot camp, they don't let you fill out those exemptions, do they?
No,
So they could potentially use that as a coercive means of vaccinating all the men in the country, pretty much.
oh, they're opening up the draft to the women too now.
Oh, yeah. All the young men and women in the entire country. They could potentially do that.
Technically speaking, I can't be drafted anymore, can I?
No, you can't. Matthew can. You can.
The irony there.
Zach can't.
I
Why? Is he
wait.
too old?
No, Zach's served.
I
Oh,
think he
yeah.
still can.
He served over three. He just served 3 years.
Yes,
Don't think he
he
can.
served 3 years, but the thing is, Obliserve is 8 years.
Yes, but it's been longer than that since he got out.
Yes, but did he go to because the way he got out, he didn't do the reserve component that normally happens when you get out after 4 or 6.
Neither did I.
Also because of the way you got out.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I
uh,
got out because of an injury.
because Zach got out the way he did, and you got out the way you did, contrary to me, who spent 8 years in,
Hmm.
I'd be exempted from the draft. Zach might, because once again the way he got out, not necessarily the amount of time he spent in.
I don't know because he got out on a general, so they may
Yes,
bring him back.
uh, it depends. They might bring him back. I wouldn't say it would be likely,
I
unless
mean,
he.
it depends on how hard up they are for men.
True, but if they're
Because
that
they're
hard
hard.
up, it's not going to matter. If they're that hard up, the only one who's not getting out of it is Jason. Well, only one who's getting out of it is Jason.
Perks of having health conditions.
Yeah. Perks of being
Yeah,
physically incapable of serving, yeah.
let's face it. In some wars, they've gone as much as where they were pulling in people my age.
Yeah. But if they
But
were to be that
Matt,
hard up, I think they would exempt you as well, also because of the way you got out.
back injury.
Yeah,
Yeah, they could still use me.
they couldn't use you in the component that they used you in before.
No,
You're too out of
but
practice.
I now have a master's degree in counseling.
Pull you as a chaplain? That would be
Yeah,
interesting.
they could do that, but it's not likely. But it could happen. They would be real desperate.
Oh yeah. If they were to start drafting people, Robert and Matt would be the first ones to be grabbed.
But theoretically speaking, if somebody's drafted and they are inoculated for the virus against their will, that's a lawsuit right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Because it was
it's a lawsuit they can't do until they get out.
it's true, but it was coerced vaccination. There was no consent whatsoever. Not forget informed consent. There was no consent.
Well, they didn't tell me what they were injecting me with when, and they lined us up and were inoculating us
Which is
in boot camp.
illegal. Which is illegal.
Uh, that was a different time. In my case, we were technically informed. They didn't
We were,
they didn't tell us what it was in, but all the paperwork we had to fill out, it was in there. So legally they covered themselves.
and see with us, they lined us up and either stuck the needles in or bang, bang, bang with the air guns.
But they've been doing illegal stuff with the military for a long time.
Now they did tell us when we were going to go down for the yellow fever shot.
See, at least then you knew what you were getting into.
The one that always caused the biggest waves while I was going through was what everyone lovingly referred to as the peanut butter shot. It's a penicillin shot right into the hip.
Why?
Well, mostly to keep you from keeling over dead while you're in boot camp from all the vaccines they just pumped into you.
They didn't give us penicillin shots. And it's dangerous for you boys because you've got two of you, the five of you that we know are allergic to penicillin.
I didn't know that.
Matt and Jason?
Yeah.
But while we were while I was going through, I think we got about 9 or 10 different vaccinations in that one day. And to keep you from dying, they give you a penicillin shot in the hip that same day, so that when all those microbes are warring for supremacy in your own body, and on the next day, and they send you to run PT, you don't keel over dead.
I find this fascinating. They just lined us up and shot us. They didn't even bother with penicillin.
I think they had too many people die in boot camp.
And the thing about it is, it's like when your granddad got his yellow fever shot, his arms swole up the size bigger than my legs
Mm-hmm.
because he's allergic to it. Now I was on antibiotics when I got the yellow fever shot, but that was because I had pneumonia that dropped down to bronchitis.
Which let's talk the variant for a second.
Omicron?
Omicron.
Omicron?
Or as some like to call it, moronic. Because
Ah,
that's been the response to it.
I like to I like to think it's a Decepticon, and I call it Omnicron.
The ultimate variant.
Yeah, you don't even get sick from it.
So far, with all the places locking down, Britain's talking about mandatory vaccination, a bunch of Europe's doing mandatory vaccination, borders have shut down. You're tired for a couple days, like you've just done some hard work, and then you get over it. You might have a cough, you might not. You basically just have a common cold.
And with that description, I could have already had it and not known.
Yeah, you really could have. It's
Nobody has died from it.
Side effect
according
of blue collar labor. I'd have no idea if I got it or not.
according to the WHO itself, no one's died from. There have been no reported deaths from the new variant. None whatsoever. It's highly infectious. It's spreading. It's already in something like 30 different countries. It's in 16 different states. It's.
It laughs at the vaccinations.
They
Oh yeah,
This one hits children too, doesn't it?
yeah. It hits everyone. And Pfizer's like, get another vaccine, get another shot. Also, we're coming up, but BioNTech saying we're coming up with a new vaccine for this one, and it's gonna be 3 shots minimum.
Why do I feel like BioNTech is owned by Beyonce?
Maybe. Do they come in singing when they get you stab you?
If you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. But
Well, it's the. I've been thinking about this particular whole debacle of the way they're reacting to the COVID scare, and the only excuse for why they would overreact to such a degree is because they knew it was a biological weapon and expected it to be worse than it really was.
Well, I can think of one other reason why they might react in such a way. Remember how many of them are 80, and therefore right in the death zone.
No, that's true. When you're
but
run
you
by
know
a bunch of
that
octogenarians.
well, except it doesn't add up because none of them act like it's dangerous.
Well, that's
In Britain, in Britain, there's currently a scandal that's going on, and I said I'd bring this up eventually. So the prime minister's in trouble because they, right after they called the lockdowns in Britain, number 10 Downing Street held a party, which is the prime minister's place.
They've held
And
7 parties total, and have got another one planned.
6 parties.
Oh, okay.
But they were, for a little bit, they don't do press conferences like we do, where they have a press secretary who just stands up and talks to the press and answers all of the questions from the reporters.
And they always look depressed.
Yeah,
Like they were pressed into the position.
but
Have been.
they decided they were going to try it, and somebody leaked the interview for the person they ended up picking, who happened to. Well, one of the questions that came up was, how would you respond if, say, it leaked that they had a get-together at number 10 for some cheese and wine? And she was completely unable to answer it. Instead, everyone was just laughing like it was some sort of joke that they had forced all these tyrannical measures onto everyone, and then not followed it themselves.
Oh yeah, Boris Johnson. He's a regular party animal.
Yeah, funny thing about that, they tested something like 12 of the parliamentary bathrooms, and 11 of them had traces of cocaine, some of which were only usable by the cabinet. But
That explains a lot about why they're so erratic about their decisions.
yeah, it really does. But Britain's not happy they have a bunch of hypocrites in office.
Well,
They don't
get
like
used to it.
being.
It's called politics.
But Britain doesn't like being locked down or told what to do. Less so than Americans, but more so than than Europeans. And so they're asking the Prime Minister to step down. The majority of British people want the Prime Minister gone.
And
Because he actually doubled down
there's
and wants mandatory vaccination.
there's also a vote of no confidence that's coming forward in the Parliament too, which should force it to a new election.
But none of the politicians, American politicians, British politicians, except for the Queen, for some reason she went and followed all the rules. But the vast majority of the people who are actually in power don't act like it's a dangerous disease.
Well,
They,
the
from the
queen is
get-go,
neither in power, nor does what she does really matter much. I'd be surprised if she has 5 years left of life.
she has the ability, if she wanted to dissolve parliament and rule as a monarch, but she won't ever do it.
No, she doesn't.
And it wouldn't. Yes, she does.
Yes, she
It's actually in her constitutional power. In the British Constitution, she has that power.
I am aware that their papers say she has the power. That is not the same thing as actually having the power.
She could do it, and then she'd have a rebellion, but she could do it.
She could try it. It wouldn't go the way she wanted it to.
But anyways, the point is, they've never acted from the get-go like it was a dangerous virus. It's all about control from the very beginning. That's why they acted the way they did. Because they want to assert power over the populace.
Well, they are a bunch of megalomaniacs.
Well, you kind of have to be to even get one of those positions. If you're not a megalomaniac, you'd never make it in politics in the first place. You have to legitimately believe that you're better than everybody to make it in politics.
I've heard people say that they were just too good for the job.
Yeah.
Rush Limbaugh stated he wouldn't run for president because it would be too big of a pay cut.
He's forgetting all the potential income from bribes. Oh wait, lobbying. Sorry.
Remember that Nancy Pelosi is the highest earner when it comes to the stock market in the entire U.S.
Yeah. You know, at one point in time, it was illegal for congressmen to do insider trading, and they passed a law making it legal.
Of course they did.
Which that's one reason why the current Trump-backed candidate for Georgia governor lost his Senate seat, was because he wouldn't stop insider trading, and the Georgians knew it. Very lackluster pick on Trump's part.
Well, Trump has made a lot of bad choices. Look at the people he put in his cabinet.
Look at the people he
Yeah.
put in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Although they may do a good decision here soon. It's looking like Roe v. Wade is gone.
Uh, don't count your chickens before they've hatched and eaten the neighborhood dog.
As per the
Uh,
analysis of numerous lawyers on the questions of the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade in one form or another is gone. The question is, what is it going to be next?
the question is, are they only going to partially dissolve it, or are they going to take it out entirely?
Yeah.
What do you mean
It's
one form or
leaning.
another?
Well, if they take it out entirely, then it goes to the states. If they take and or they can say that it's out and out murder, and therefore it's illegal nationwide.
But they're not going to do that.
Which they're not going to do that. Or they can take and go through and say that the Mississippi law is legal, which makes it to where after 15 weeks, abortion is illegal in Mississippi, and all other states can come to that point. So it's which degree are they going to take and settle on?
Now,
so
Roberts.
There's no longer the chance of them just saying Roe v. Wade is upheld.
Yeah, no, there's no
not
chance.
Likely.
Or, well, yeah, it's not likely.
Not likely.
When it
so what you're saying is
they could still.
You can never have any guarantees, but according to the questions, 6 of the judges appear to not favor Roe v. Wade's conclusions.
Okay, so just making sure for clarity's sake, Roe v. Wade isn't one way or another done with. It's just most likely done with.
Just most likely, yes.
Because one way or another basically would be saying that on one hand, Roe v. Wade is done with because they're going so far out of bound, like saying, I don't know, not only is abortion legal, but it's mandatory in all cases, or the other side where abortion is murder, not allowed whatsoever. That is one way or another Roe v. Wade is done.
It's looking like, regardless of the ruling, the ruling is going to be that Roe v. Wade is no longer sustainable, and they're going to either change the threshold or they're going to send it to the states. Most likely, send it to the states.
Several of the judges have stated that the viability standard is irrational and not a basis that can be upheld.
But the viability standard isn't actually Roe v. Wade. That was Casey.
And they also pointed out that one of them pointed out that the very people that are pushing for or not setting up laws that would affect somebody else's body are also taking and pushing for mandatory vaccines,
which is messing with someone else's body. Yeah.
Which is messing with somebody else's body. So, but they've stated when life begins is a point. The most liberal person on the court stated that only radical Christian believe that life begins at conception.
Which is a lie. An out-and-out lie.
Well, I wouldn't say it's an out-and-out lie. It is probably misinformed. Actually, I can guarantee you it's misinformed. But that is not the same thing as a lie.
Do not assign incompetence where malice is more easily explainable.
I think you got that quote backward.
No, I think most people have it backwards. Malice is usually the easier answer.
You see,
Well,
I disagree because I have seen a lot, where malice was never the intention.
The
Malice has to be the intention, or it's not malice. It could be
the
greed, it could be selfishness, it could be incompetence, it could be stupidity, it could be lack of foresight, it could be anything, but malice is intentional. I want to hurt that person or
now,
well,
those group of people.
and more often than not, when people assign, well, not more often than not, a lot of the time when people assign incompetence to an individual, especially a public leader, malice is really at fault.
Now, I am not saying to prescribe incompetence where malice can be used as an explanation. I'm just saying that you got more than just incompetence and malice on this spectrum. Take all things into account.
could be both.
Could very well be
That
both.
that I figure is a lot of the time the case.
Now, when it comes down to it, technically Roe versus Wade was one of those eugenics ruling.
It was malicious from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because the whole point of Roe versus Wade was not the right of privacy, but the right of the doctor making the decision.
So that some people wouldn't give birth to children. You didn't need those undesirables breeding.
To be fair, and this is going to sound a little weird, but allow me to put a caveat in it to begin with. I am not saying they are right. In fact, I immediately disagree with the premise that they are right. However, I have met several people where I at least understand the sentiment.
Oh, I have too. I've met people that I honestly think the world's better off if they don't have children. But
But like I
But
said, I
you also
don't
have to
agree with them, but I do understand.
you also have to take into account that not all children are like their parents.
that's true.
That is true.
There's a whole passage in Ezekiel about not killing their fathers for the son's sins
Or the
and vice
sun for
versa.
sis.
Which, like I said, I don't believe they are correct in their mindset.
The
But I
thing
do
about it
understand.
is Sanger, the person who was the proponent for abortion in the first place, Margaret Sanger, she wanted abortion and established Planned Parenthood specifically for the elimination of the undesirable races. She was a white supremacist.
Hmm.
I think
And
it's
now you've got
go
the
on.
modern eugenicists who are mostly rich people who don't want those filthy poor people to have children. As if they don't realize that it's those filthy poor people that have put them in the spot they're in the first place.
And keep them there. Because if there's not enough filthy poor people to do the dirty work for them, then they've got to do it themselves. They seem to
Which
forget that.
it's kind of interesting that they were pushing abortion so strong among American poor and world poor for that matter. But yet they want to import in a whole bunch of foreign poor to work as a slave class in the United States.
Well, and the thing is, the wealthy people aren't having kids. Wealthy people don't usually have a lot of kids.
Well, it depends on the wealthy people.
Most wealthy people, they've done enough studies to show that they don't have a lot of kids.
Depends on the
Thing
So
wealthy
about
people.
I said most, Josh.
thing about it is that it also comes down to the Sierra Club standard. The
It
Sierra
was
Club put out in the 70s that the world was overpopulated. That's where the book The Population Bomb came out. And they have been promoting that the world should be reduced to 1 billion people to
Uh,
save the planet.
I actually heard recently, and I don't know if this is accurate. I'll have to double check the numbers. That either this year or next year is projected to be the first time since the Dark Ages that the world is projected to have a smaller population this year, at the end of this year, than it did at the end of last.
It should be really
That's
surprising, being we have no major wars going on in the world. We
and we
have
don't have
minor
the
wars, but
and we don't have the Black Death.
Or Genghis Khan, for that matter.
Yeah.
yes. Which all took and affected world populations in
Hmm.
a big way.
Now, I'm not sure if
But
that's accurate, but I did see that floating around somewhere. I'd have to check it.
well, I could understand that when you look at the consequences for their actions, and they've been pushing since the 80s for people to have smaller families. They've been trying to push uh, contraceptives and abortion on third world countries. And with China
Yeah.
having gone for the consequences of China's one child policy, which have finally come to fruition, where they now don't have enough women for the men, it's I could see the because you've got a country of what 1.2 billion or more.
And I think Australia is in a similar way, where they don't have enough men for the women.
So you, yeah, and that most and a lot of their women are feminists, so they've been contaminated mentally.
I think last I heard it was like a 70-30 split. That number may
Whew.
also be wrong.
If it's true, that's bad. That's not a good split.
Yeah.
No, Russia's had a problem with infidelity since the Soviet Union collapse. So uh, there's a natural suspicion of long term relationships in Russia.
Wait, didn't they have a problem with infidelity before the Soviet Union collapsed?
They had a problem with infidelity before the Soviet Union rose.
Yeah, I think they've had a problem with infidelity for a long time.
Well, the Russian I was listening to stated that it was since the collapse, but still, yeah. But the family was one of the things that the communists tried to undermine in the first place.
Oh yeah.
True.
Mm. There are a lot of documented. Well, there's a lot of documentation about the Nazis doing that.
So when you're taking and the Nazis are just a socialist. There's no difference between them and the communists. Is they just took power in a different way.
And they're not international. They're nationalists.
I
They're not,
defy that statement. They are far more successful in science than the communists ever were.
yes, and they were far more deadly than the communists were. No, the
Agreed.
communists were more deadly than they.
Well, yeah, the
Communists
communists
were more
were a
deadly
lot
than
more
they.
deadly. The socialists just have a tendency, or specifically the fascists, have a tendency of being more focused on being deadly to other populations than their own.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
While
but
the
that's the
nature of the
fascist.
nationalist part.
while the communists are more
But wait,
deadly to even their own
wait a second.
population.
The Nazis weren't fascists.
Yeah, they were.
No,
Fascism is a
No,
socialism doctrine.
fascism is socialism through syndication. The Nazis weren't syndicalists.
the Italians were.
Okay, fair. Um, Let me amend my statement then. The
The
National
Spanish and the
Socialists.
Italians were.
Yeah, the
The,
National Socialists.
the National Socialists, because the fascists were the Italians and the Spanish.
It's basically softer socialism, from what I can tell, without the racial aspect that the Nazis had.
I don't know. The Well, the Nazis had their concentration camps. The Italians had their ghettos, which were the same thing.
Yeah.
Everyone likes to forget about that, but it happened.
Thing about it is, you've got the gulags in the Soviet Union,
Mm-hmm. And
and
you had the Japanese internment camps in the USA. No one's hands are clean here.
no, and
Well,
that
at
was
least
It
it
was,
was
yeah.
unconstitutional, though I must say at least we weren't wiping them out. We were making sure they were fed, even if they didn't like the food.
the, it was still a crime.
Oh,
Still
it
a crime.
was, absolutely.
I've heard
Abs-
so many people take and talk up FDR and his administration, but that was criminal. No way around it. But he was a socialist. Socialists take and destroy people.
Ugh,
I was just
I
thinking,
think we're running out of
eh,
topics.